Welcome into the Fantasy Guides podcast. My name is Andrew Teuscher, and I am joined today by the owner, the operator of Fantasy Guides and fantasyguides.com, Stephen Rippey, as well as Fantasy Guides contributor Jacob Rhodes. We have gathered today in this fine evening to discuss some wide receivers, tiers, and rankings. Last episode, go back and listen to it. We dug through the running back tier in rankings. And of course, we're going to do this together just like we did last time. I have made some tiers through our Fantasy Guides rankings, which you can find at fantasyguides.com or follow at Fantasy Guides on Instagram. I took those, I put them into tiers. Tier-based ranking is important. We're going to do that together. And these guys are going to try to disagree with me and be wrong. Jacob, do you agree to these terms?
To disagree with you, I absolutely agree with those terms.
I knew you would. Steven, how are you feeling in this new house? Are you ready to agree with everything I have to say?
No, not at all. We haven't been able to chat as much because I've been having a move over the past few days. So I'm excited to disagree with probably most of it. I'm sure Keenan Allen's going to be probably not even on the sheet. There's probably a tier 30 with you ranking him there.
Fat Keenan will be a topic of discussion when we get there, and I am so ready for it now with this new news that he's been pounding that deep dish pizza in Chicago. Attaboy, Keenan. Way to prove me right. Speaking of news like Fat Keenan, we're going to go ahead and kick that to the end of the show. So if you're a normal pod listener, we usually throw it at the beginning. We're going to kick that to the end. YouTube listeners, catering to you. We're going to get right into the tiers and rankings, but don't worry. We'll get to those tiers. We're here for you. And speaking of tiers and rankings, like I said, we're going through wide receiver tiers. And to reiterate how I discussed it last podcast, tiers are important. Rankings, everybody knows rankings. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever. Rankings don't tell the whole story. Rankings are important, but tiers are equally important to know along with them. Tiers are groups of players who we view similarly. For instance, the wide receiver 5 and the wide receiver 6 might not be the same value apart as the wide receiver 7 and the wide receiver 8. All right, because they might be in different tiers. And that's what we're going to go through and break down is what players do we view in similar tiers? Not that we agree that in the exact ranking of who's ahead of who, but do we generally view these guys as the same? And we're going to try to tear each other apart as we do so. For instance, getting into the first set of tiers that I've so colorfully made on this nice Google sheet, I got tier 1. And Steven, I don't know if you listened last week. I can't just have boring tier names. Alrighty, so
okay.
It's going to get creative. The first tier, I've called it. Tier 1, if your favorite video game came out on a weekend, your family was away, and DoorDash was offering a great deal. AKA, what more could you want? So this is like the stars have aligned. You've got a great wide receiver. You've got a great offense. You've got a great quarterback. There isn't any more you could want. And in that tier 1, I have CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Ja'Marr Chase, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. 4 guys. Steven, I'll start with you. Any of those guys you would push out of the first tier, or would you completely cut this into 2 different tiers? Am I way far off here?
Just quickly, Andrew, let's you and I do like a little marketing talk after this about titles. And
that was a pretty kick butt title. I don't know what you're talking about.
Simplification, something like
it's a paragraph over
like
here.
Madden DoorDash or NCAA DoorDash, versus like, this is too long. This is like taking up way too much space on the show sheet, but
I'm a Missourian, like one great Mark Twain. So I just like to view myself as the next Mark Twain.
All right.
Humbly.
Andrew, I know I want to disagree with you, but I was working on tiers before we jumped on this, and I literally have this tier ranked exactly the same.
This should be the only easy one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you might have some people, especially based on, I posted about Justin Jefferson today, that would say he should be in tier 1. I don't think he belongs there. So no, I like this. All of these guys have a good quarterback. All of them have proven to be target monsters. I don't disagree with this tier.
Jacob, you're a severe Justin Jefferson apologist.
I am.
Tell us. Do you put JJ in this tier?
No, I think he belongs with the tier 2 guys actually now with the news that came out today. But I think tier 1's good. I don't think St. Brown has the same ceiling as the other 3 guys, but I think his floor puts him in this tier 1 of guys that you can truly rely on in your wide receiver 1 slot. So I'm good with tier 1. Tier 1's easy.
His floor might be as high as all of these guys.
Yeah.
You know,
you might have the highest floor in the league at receiver.
He's going to maybe have 2 games around 10 points the entire season. Everything else will be high.
Yeah.
I almost, if I had to nitpick myself, I could hear an argument for CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek being in their own tier.
Agreed.
Because Jahmyr and Amon-Ra are opposites. Jahmyr has this upside that we know is there, but haven't necessarily fully seen. While Amon-Ra doesn't really have that, but like you guys said, he has this incredible floor. So if I had to nitpick myself, I could separate them. But at the same time, we go back to the would you throw your shoe at me if I was drafting and I took this guy ahead of that one? And I just don't think I could throw my shoe at Jacob if he took Ja'Marr Chase ahead of Tyreek Hill. I just couldn't do. I'd want to. Yeah. Like a nice flip-flop size 12 right at Jacob's head. Like I dream of that, but I wouldn't do it. Jacob wouldn't deserve it.
He is my wide receiver 1, so that's fair.
Ooh.
Well, could you have a tier A and B? Can we do that with tiers?
No, I am so anti that. You cannot. Yeah. Okay, tier 1A and tier 1B is just tier 1 and tier 2, and you just.
Is that just a way to like not to just say, oh no, I had them in the same tier? Is that like
you're just ranking them at that point?
Yes.
This is a tier list.
Okay,
miss me with that.
Now I did post the other day, Andrew, and these are all true stats that Ja'Marr Chase. If people listening want to adjust these guys in their own tiers, Ja'Marr Chase did have as many. He had fewer. What was it? Double-digit games than Jacoby Myers last season. So,
holy moly, Jacoby Myers now in tier 1.
He gets way too much hate, honestly. That's a guy we should bring up in honorable mentions later.
No, I'm gonna forget him.
When we get to tier 20, Jacob will talk about him.
I'm gonna bury him just
wide receiver 24 last year. We'll just bury him.
He doesn't exist. That'll push us into tier 2 because we're agreeing too much for my liking. Now I think Jacob at least sounded like he might have some disagreement starting here when we were in the pre-pod. Tier 2. I've deemed this your favorite dish at a restaurant that you've never been to. All right, so like imagine you go to a restaurant and you're the person who always gets the same thing at no matter where they go, like chicken strips. That's usually the go-to for somebody at every restaurant they go to, or like a burger. Jacob, Steven, is that either one of you?
It depends on the place. I'm not as picky as I once used to be. So it used to be a chicken fingers guy though.
Oh, I was gonna guess. Steven, you strike me as someone who would try a lot of foods.
I do. I didn't used to be. I used to be the picky eater as a kid, but now, as an adult, I do try things. I will never order chicken fingers ever.
I'm a human garbage can.
That is not an adult food there, Jacob. But dang it, Andrew, I'm literally working on a post about tiers, and this looks the same. Tier 1 and 2 looks the same.
Let me tell everyone who's in this tier. So I deemed it this title of your favorite dish at a restaurant you've never been to because like it's something you like, but you haven't quite seen it with this quarterback.
Oh, I see.
Got it? So like in this tier is Justin Jefferson, Puka Nacua, Garret Wilson, AJ Brown. And for AJ Brown and Puka, it's not necessarily not with this quarterback, but not in this system. You haven't seen AJ Brown with Kellen Moore. You haven't seen Puka Nacua with a full season of Cooper Kupp. Should we be worried? At the same time, I've had chicken strips. They're darn good.
You know what this is, Andrew? This is more like, let's just say, I can't think of a dish right now, but let's say like gumbo. And you're used to having sausage gumbo. But they're like, oh, no, our specialty is chicken gumbo.
Who eats a gumbo at a bunch of restaurants?
What's this guy talking about?
Are you from Louisiana?
I do like gumbo a lot. That's why I brought it up.
Who just gets gumbo everywhere?
Well, I'm just saying, like...
Never been to any place that offers gumbo.
Like cheeseburger?
Well, they don't serve it at McDonald's, okay, Jacob? Or,
okay.
Or Chili's. No, but this is, like you said, it's a different ingredient added to the main dish that you're used to. So, that's
I'm going to disagree here.
You ready to disagree?
Yep. I want Marvin Harrison in this tier.
All right, so no, you're wrong. Steven, who else would you move? I'm just kidding. We'll go back to Marvin Harrison.
I did debate Marvin Harrison. I did not. I couldn't pull the trigger.
The next name he's the top of the name on the next tier. I don't think it's super unreasonable to put him in this tier when you listed why these guys are in this tier.
Well, do you need a little bit of prove it, Jacob, for a tier 2?
You just mentioned what tier 2 is. It's guys that have different situations going on. I don't think that's a whole lot different from Marv.
Yeah, he's got a pretty big different situation, being that he's going from college to the NFL.
This would be like
best
if you're
prospect we've seen since Calvin Johnson.
This is going to a restaurant that you've never been to and getting a dish you've never had. You don't know if it's the restaurant. You don't know if it's the dish. You're just in a lost world.
You call that a Marvin Harrison.
You called him Marvin Harrison. Marvin Harrison Jr. We know his dad's a stud. Go Colts.
Yeah.
My main problem with him not being in this tier is the tier that he's in. Like the guys that he's with on the next tier that you're going to bring up. I think that's my bigger issue with it.
We can jump to them then in a second. Would you guys move anyone out of this? I think.
No.
Honestly, I'd consider moving Puka maybe out.
Out? Why would you move him out?
I'm with Andrew on this. I thought about Puka a little bit with the injury, a little more Cup.
I have never seen a second-year wide receiver get so much hate. It's kind of crazy.
Isn't Stafford hurt now too? Didn't he just get hurt today?
He had a tight hammy at joint practice. He's going to be fine.
He's just old. That's just he didn't want to practice today.
I could relate to that. Yeah. No,
but I'll leave Puka.
I'm good with this, but let's debate, Andrew. Is there any chance you would move Marvin Harrison into this tier?
No, absolutely not. Because the guys he's in the tier with is my tier 3, and I've deemed it very cleverly a Ferrari, but it's driven by a 16-year-old who can't drive a stick. And what I mean by that,
Murray has produced wide receiver ones. Keep going.
And that one's more about this being a Maserati Marv. He's the height of a 12-year-old Kyler Murray, but I'll admit he has the skill of a professional. But you've never seen Marv enough. Like, this is a brand new Maserati. Maserati changed their body, and we have no idea. This looks like a Camry. Like, it could be. I don't know. But Marv is with Devontae Adams. Ambiguous quarterback situation. Literally 2 quarterbacks might throw him the ball this year for most of the year. Chris Olave. Derek Carr is the definition of a 16-year-old who doesn't know what they're doing. Mike Evans is Baker. Drake London has Achilles-ridden, and we've never seen Drake London actually produced at a level along with the Achilles-ridden Kirk Cousins. It's just these are the question marks. These are the guys who could be wide receiver 5 or better potentially. But at the same time, we just don't know. Like, we've never seen them do it, or I have reason to believe they might take a big step back with Devontae Adams.
Yeah, so I guess my biggest thing is like if we look at the Ohio State wide receivers, Garret Wilson, Marvin Harrison, and Chris Olave, we agree that he's a better prospect than those guys.
Yeah,
now we've seen it.
They agree too.
Exactly. We've seen it to some extent from those guys, but we haven't seen an elite level of play from either Garret Wilson or Chris Olave. I would argue Marvin Harrison's quarterback situation is better than both of those guys. It's at least a tie with Garret Wilson. So if you're going to have Garret Wilson in this tier 2, it feels like Marvin Harrison should also be.
Yeah, Steve's on board now.
All right, so I think we're just riding the high of Puka Nacua last year. Where did Puka finish? He was top 6?
4.
Wide receiver 4. He had literally the best wide receiver season ever as a rookie, and he was the wide receiver 4.
Well, if he's at the bottom of these tier 2, that'd be wide receiver 9.
So where I'm getting at with this is that was the best. Ja'Marr Chase. Would you guys hope that Marvin Harrison being as good as Ja'Marr Chase, you think that's a good outcome?
Yeah. He's got less target competition in Arizona than what Chase had, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, Trey McBride versus T. Higgins. We've seen Ja'Marr Chase was the wide receiver 11 last year in his 3rd year. I know as a rookie he was a wide receiver 5, so that's not going to help my argument here too much. But we see good players in good positions. Not always like we can't just we haven't seen this guy play at all, and we're just ready to say he's gonna get every single target right away, right off the bat. You're not gonna miss a step. I have a hard time saying it. I think there's too many question marks around his head.
Well, that's interesting then that he's in the same tier as Drake London, who's done nothing better than wide receiver like 35.
Yeah, we've at least seen Drake London not be good.
And Garret Wilson hasn't been better than wide receiver 21, so like at least Puka's performed.
Andrew, I need some rules. It was just you and Jacob last week, correct?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean,
So
Jesse was here. Jesse mostly
did
agrees
you
with me,
guys
so I like him.
adjust the tiers based on like a vote? I mean, there's 3 of us.
Yeah.
We mostly came around to agreeing. We talked it out through each other. No, there's not too much gnashing of teeth.
Okay. I'm just trying to decide if we move Harrison. I'm
Are you
feeling
about
like
to make a motion? Where's the gavel?
Yeah.
Actually, have mine still
Yeah.
from the
Nice.
episode.
I think I want to move Marvin Harrison right under Garret Wilson.
Into tier 2. So
I
you're
think
saying
so.
okay,
talent plus
no. So,
opportunity plus
tier.
quarterback play.
All right, it's a tier. So we're going back to the shoe test.
Yeah.
Would you throw your shoe at someone, Steve, if they took Marvin Harrison Jr. over Justin Jefferson? This is what you're saying. You're saying they're interchangeable. Because I could see a world where someone takes Puka Nacua over Justin Jefferson or Puka Nacua over AJ Brown.
This
But
is why I
if
do
you
small
take-
tiers.
If you take Marvin Harrison
feeling-
over
hey.
AJ Brown, you're out of your mind. I'm throwing my
Okay.
shoe at you, Steve.
Okay, how about this?
But I'm throwing
Andrew.
something at you if you draft Drake London over Marvin Harrison. There's something heavy
I
being
don't
thrown
think
at your
that's
head.
ridiculous.
Andrew, I'd like you to put Marvin Harrison in tier 2B if you could.
Now you're getting a second shoe. You're getting both Crocs. They're in sport mode. They're strapped up and they're coming at your face, Steven.
So I could not draft. I don't think he is interchangeable with AJ Brown. I don't think he's interchangeable with Justin Jefferson, but I don't think it's as far off as you're making it sound.
He's right there with Garret Wilson. I think that's
the one I'm thinking. Like,
So do we move Garret Wilson back?
that's what I'm wondering. At least those 3 guys at the top there have
No,
proven
You've
it.
seen it.
there's a tier 2B. I'm sorry.
No, there's not. There is no. That's just tier 3. That's
okay,
just how numbers
That's
work.
fine.
We
That's
gotta
fine.
move-
Then
I
push
think
everybody
we-
down.
Andrew, I think we got to move Garrett.
Garrett down.
We got
All
to.
right.
Don't you think, Jacob?
I think we need a separate tier with those 2 guys. Honestly,
You think
No,
Marvin?
because I still can buy into Devontae Adams having as good of a season as those 2.
well, okay. I guess we have a separate issue with the bottom of tier 3 then that we'll get to in a second.
All right. So then tier 3 has in it again Marvin Harrison Jr., Devontae Adams, Chris Olave, Mike Evans, Drake London, Garrett Wilson. Not necessarily in that order, like ranking specific within the tiers aside, but you were saying those guys are interchangeable.
No.
Okay, Steve. He
Can I
wants
not-
to get rid of Drake London, and he's being mean. So, would you
Hey.
move Drake London?
Wait a minute. Do I not have editing abilities in this thing?
I
No,
don't
you
either.
don't.
It's
You
driving me
might. I
nuts.
don't know.
Because now you got the colors all messed up.
I'll make you an editor.
Because this Garrett Wilson now with like this blue in the purple column is messing me up.
Oh,
Okay.
you're such a graphic designer.
All right. Let's see here.
Would you move Drake London out of tier 3?
Well, at the
Would you
very
move him
least, put him
back?
at the bottom of this tier first. Will you please do that for me, so I can look at this clearly?
Why did I invite this guy onto the podcast?
You got to drag. You got to drag.
It's not good on MacBook, Steven. All right, he's dragged. Oh, see, now it left a white spot.
Forget it.
All right,
Forget
we're
it.
fine. Everything's fine.
I'll manage.
Drake London, Steven, would you keep him in tier 3 with these other guys again? Garrett Wilson, Mike Evans, Olave, Adams, Harrison. Or do you think he belongs more with Brandon Aiyuk, DJ Moore, Michael Pittman to
I think
kinda tease
he
that?
needs to get out of this tier. I think he needs to be with. You can't sell me on he's in a different tier than
Mhm.
like Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah.
I can't get behind that.
You're asking Marvin Harrison to prove it. Drake London's never proved it. I'm sorry.
Okay. But all these other guys behind him in tier 4, and so I'll start teasing tier 4 and then I'll make my argument. Tier 4, who these guys want to move him back with, Drake London. Tier 4 is someone's going to make us look dumb. This is
tier.
a group of guys who is a group of players who they're good. Like a lot of these players are definitively good wide receivers in the NFL, and situation and competition in their offense, or maybe a quarterback question mark, is going to determine whether or not they are wide receiver 1 upside, or if they're fringe wide receiver 2s who you're mad you drafted. So this is guys like Brandon Aiyuk, who is in a heck of a whirlwind right now of situation.
Tier 3 if he was on a team. Definitively on a team.
I even disagree there, but let me read the rest of them. DJ Moore in competition with Fat Keenan with a rookie QB, MPJ with a running back for a quarterback, Jalen Waddle with Tua and Tyreek in that offense. DK Metcalf with a slew of other wide receivers. Deebo Samuel, again, that crowded 49ers offense. Malik Neighbors has Daniel Jones, I'll just say that. Cooper Kupp has Puka Nacua and an old Matthew Stafford. Nico Collins, I think, would actually go up a tier, but whatever. In a crowded offense, Amari Cooper has Deshaun Watson, Rashee Rice. We don't know what's going to happen in KC. I think Drake London has a way clearer path to targets than all of the rest of those guys.
But he's not even come close to doing anything these guys have already done.
Because he's had Desmond Ridder.
I get that. He's had Desmond Ridder, and who was before that? Did he have
Marcus Mariota?
Yeah, Mariota. Yeah, but DJ Moore was good without a good quarterback. Michael Pittman's been good without a good
If you're a good wide receiver, you'll perform better than wide receiver 35.
Go ask DJ Moore how he did with Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield. He was a wide receiver, a fringe wide receiver too.
He's been a wide receiver one before. He only recently had. He just did it with Justin Fields too.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is it's not just, we get into this world of, the quarterback is everything. No, it's system plus quarterback has a lot of value.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that the Falcons were at the bottom of the league in pass attempts all of the time, and Arthur Smith thought he was in his bag, and he just wasn't. Drake London was dominating, getting a near 30% target share as a rookie. Now he's Kirk Cousins?
Yeah, but just because he gets a 30% target share doesn't put him in another tier over these guys.
What's the number two indicator?
It is
in fantasy production.
Good receivers are going to produce. You mentioned
That's not always
DJ Moore.
true.
You mentioned DJ Moore. He was wide receiver 16, 23, 18, 24 in Carolina. Those are all way better seasons than what Drake London's had in his first 2 years.
And he's arguably had better situations.
But
you just shut his situations down.
Right, they stunk, but I think Drake London's might be worse.
I'm trying to think of some receivers who have had high target shares and not
Garret
really
Wilson.
produced.
Yeah, Garret Wilson.
Good target share and wide receiver 21, wide receiver 26, better than Drake London.
Well, Drake
but
London
just
too.
as bad of quarterback play. You
Drake
have to be
London's
honest
already
about
had
that.
the high target share. Yeah, well, he's got the good quarterback
Target
now.
share versus target total. So there's still I know we talk target shares, but the Jets were absolutely throwing the crap out of the ball. The Falcons weren't.
That's true.
I'm being outvoted. Steven, Jacob, are you guys still on the side of we have to drop Drake London?
Yeah.
I think so. I think if I can be talked into, he's at the top of tier 4. But if we're just talking I just can't sign off on he's in a fully better tier than like a Jalen Waddle or a Michael Pittman. I just don't. If it happens, great. I'm just saying from what I've seen, and yes, I think we're all excited about Kirk Cousins, but I don't think that's enough for me to just say, yeah, that guy's definitely in a different tier.
Yeah. All right. So Drake London's been dropped down to tier 4. Again, someone's going to make us look dumb.
Devil's advocate, that's what you have the tier named, and he could be one of those guys that makes us look dumb.
Won't make me look dumb. It's going to make you silly gooses look dumb. I'm going to be looking like the smart goose. But this tier is tough. This is the tier of drafts where I'm just kind of sitting back at wide receiver. Do you guys kind of generally agree? This is sort of the wide receiver dead zone. There's so much upside here potentially. But I don't know if
this tier.
What'd you say?
You want to be at the end of this tier drafting if this is when you're looking at wide receiver. I've done a ton of mock drafts and I don't like this spot for wide receiver.
I love taking DK Metcalf in the 3rd, so I'll disagree there a little bit.
No, he's a guy I've been taking a lot, but DJ Moore going ahead of him, where he's going, I haven't enjoyed some of those picks earlier.
Yeah, DJ Moore's one I feel like we could definitely look dumb on. He was really good last year with a really bad quarterback. Sorry, Justin, but that's the reality of the situation. DJ Moore could be really good. We're believers in the other 2 receivers that are there now that are new. It's just it's a lot of new going on in that offense.
Well, and I got to do more research on this Fat Keenan thing that's going on.
To fill in the listeners, Fat Keenan, apparently since his time in Chicago, he's listed at 211 in his time in LA, and now that he's in Chicago, he's listed at a beefy. He's a small tight end. He's at 231 now. Is Mr. Keenan Allen? So
there's no way. If that's the case,
they're reporting it. This isn't like one of those situations when you're in grade school on a basketball team and you're sending in your tournament roster and you're saying this guy who's 5'5" is actually 6 feet. No, you don't want him. Unless Keenan wants to play a joke. Was that you, Jacob?
Yeah.
Or you're on Tinder and you have to put your height up 6 inches. You don't want to look like you're 231 pounds if you're Keenan. There's no motivation unless he just thinks it's funny, which I'm all for, actually. Fat Keenan.
This is bad news because he was going to be the guy that was going to make you look dumb this year. I'm going to be doing a lot of research tonight on this weight gain potential.
There's this one guy I want to tell you about, Steven. You ever heard of Kelvin Benjamin?
I have.
God.
One biscuit shy of being a tight end, Mr. Kelvin Benjamin. Drag us back into the tier discussions. Tier 4, again, Brandon Aiyuk, Moore, Pittman, Waddle, Metcalf, Samuel, Neighbors, Kupp, Collins, Cooper, Rice, London. Nico Collins should be a tier higher. He's done it. He's got the quarterback.
DJ Moore's done it, and he's got the quarterback.
I could hear out a DJ Moore argument. I'd consider moving up DJ Moore.
Well, but you're
Jalen
saying
Waddle's
Nico
done
Collins
it.
should be in tier 3? Is that what you're saying? Or in a tier 4 above some of these other guys?
I straight up have Nico Collins ranked above all of those guys except for Garret Wilson in tier 3.
I have Metcalf ranked above all those guys too. So
How high do you have DK Metcalf?
wide receiver 10.
What are you doing? What
I
is this?
won't waver.
Well, okay, I'll explain my logic on Nico. Once you explain your logic on Metcalf, why are you so high on DK Metcalf this season, Jacob?
Ryan Grubbs.
Extrapolate.
New offensive coordinator, new offensive scheme in Seattle. He is reportedly moving around a lot more and being utilized a lot more in that offense. I think he's the clear-cut wide receiver 1 there. I trust Geno Smith, weirdly enough, and that defense got worse. So I'm expecting a lot of passing volume, and I think he's going to benefit mightily.
I feel like you guys have sold me on DK. He's probably one of my most drafted wide receivers.
I still can't
and
put
he's
him up
just
there, though.
good. He's just good.
I just don't think he's as good as someone like Nico Collins. Nico Collins already did it last year. He had the second highest yards per route run, only to Tyreek Hill. And now we could see the Texans throw the ball even more now that they have an offseason of knowing that they might have the second coming of Patrick Mahomes. In last season and a half PPR, Nico Collins was wide receiver 9. All right, so I think with even more CJ Stroud going into his second year, I'm not scared by a Stephon Diggs. We've already seen Nico Collins is the one stepping off the field.
I don't think you're scared enough, actually.
Yeah.
I'm not scared of no boogeyman.
Stephon Diggs, Keenan Allen. It's the same thing for DJ Moore and Nico Collins. They're in the same boat. This is the same situation with both of these guys.
Yeah, I think you should be a little more scared to put him that high, unless I just don't see a situation where he's not going to run the same yards per route run. That's going to drop. He is
17 games from Tank Dell too.
Yeah, and Tank already looks in midseason form. Yeah, I think that this is going to be a good offense. It's going to have to be super elite for him to do as good as you're hoping he'll do. I mean, it could happen, but I think it's risky.
I will leave it alone at that point then. I think Nico Collins probably belongs where he's at, but I do have him at the very top of this tier. Is basically how I have it ranked. It sounds like that's how Jacob has it ranked. Steven, is there anyone that you think drastically could move up out into this tier 3 or would actually maybe even move back? Is there anyone standing out in this tier for you?
I think this is pretty good. I think this is just a big tier. I'm trying to see if, Andrew, I have another critique about your tiers.
Tell me more.
You go column by column and then you drop down. So I'm looking at tier 5, but I have to scroll. I have to go back and forth. So we're talking about tier 4, right? Or are you talking about moving him into tier 3?
Would you move anyone outside of this tier, whether it be up or back?
The tier 4.
Would you move anyone from tier 4 to tier 3 or tier 4 to tier 5? Either direction, Steven.
Thank you. So I would probably put Stephon Diggs in tier 4.
You would move him up?
Well, because I like him just as much as Nico.
Wow.
Yeah. And I don't think that shouldn't be a hot take.
Would you draft him interchangeably with someone like DK Metcalf?
I'd like DK a little bit more, but yeah, we're acting like Stephon Diggs is a has-been. He had
the second half of last year he was.
So we're going off of a 7-game sample size?
It was bad.
It was no bueno.
7-game sample size, and now
Por
he has
favor.
really, really, really legit target competition.
But but my argument is, how many receivers just completely drop off that were elite, borderline elite wide receivers at the age of 30? He's not like 32. How many just drop off from 29 to 30?
I don't have those numbers in front of me, but
They don't
Steven,
exist.
It wasn't a sudden.
They're out there.
It's not a sudden drop off if he takes a small step back in the second half of last year, and then this year entering his age, what will eventually be his 31-year-old season, he then takes an even further drop off with more competition.
I'm less worried about him than I was Mike Evans last year with Baker Mayfield. I mean, I think that's legitimate.
Oh, that's a good argument.
I mean,
this guy likes to flaunt around the Mike Evans thing. I was right, guys. Steven flaunting his old man victories on us. I want all young guys. If you're above the age of 30, you can't be in these top tiers unless your name is Devontae Adams. It's my rule.
That's probably the only one I would nitpick a little bit. I mean, this tier could get even bigger. I don't know. I'm also high on George Pickens too. So
I had a hard time splitting this. Okay, let's talk Brandon Aiyuk then briefly, and then I'll move us on to the next tier. If Brandon Aiyuk, because of the news, it sounds my gut feeling now is he's staying in San Francisco.
I think
Before, I thought he was moving. But the story is Pittsburgh or 49ers, unless something crazy happens. Where does he go for you? Does he stay in this tier if he goes to Pittsburgh?
Hell no.
Because Casey was hardcore making an argument that he would.
No, there's no, like, if he goes to Pittsburgh, you know what? I'll be honest. Do you even like him more than George Pickens if he goes to Pittsburgh?
I like him more than George Pickens, but I don't like him much more than George Pickens.
I think I think it could be a coin flip between which one of those wide receivers has a better season if he goes to Pittsburgh. He would definitely drop out of that tier. I would put him. Yeah, I'd probably put him just below, like, maybe Devonta Smith in your tier 5, somewhere around there.
Jacob, yourself?
I think that's fine. I don't know. Again, the way you have this tier named, I think Aiyuk in Pittsburgh could make us look dumb. He's a good enough receiver, but I think he's definitely tier 3 if he stays in San Francisco.
I disagree on moving him up. He had 105 targets last year and averaged 15.6 points per game. That's insane efficiency. I think even if he stays, I think we're getting a little bit of Josh Jacobs here. He's not really training this offseason, not in full speed. He won't play in a preseason game. I mean, some guys don't anyway, but he's not prepping for the season. And he has to be the most efficient wide receiver in the NFL again, or at least top 3.
Well, they had the least amount of pass attempts last year. I don't think that repeats itself. But
that is true.
Well, but I don't know that it goes up drastically either.
Probably not
in
drastically.
Pittsburgh. And also, San Francisco is always efficient. So coaching plays a big part of that in the way they run their offense. So he's going to be more efficient in San Francisco than he is in Pittsburgh. And, I don't want to get too much into training camp hype, but George Pickens just looks different this year. So I think he would have real competition. And again, I don't know. I still might pick Pickens to outscore him if that happens.
Alrighty. So now that we mentioned Pickens, I say Pickens in this tier enough. That drops us into tier 5. Again, tier 4, hodgepodge. If you're drafting and there's this tier of wide receivers, like Steven said, either get your favorite or pick the last one. Because tier 5, honestly, I had a hard time deciding who should be in tier 4 and who should be in tier 5. Tier 5 is you're really good, but there's an ick I just can't shake. Steven, have you heard this catchy phrase, the ick? It was a big thing last year.
No.
It's like it just makes you feel icky inside. Like you just feel gross.
Yeah.
It's like
each of these guys has some ick, except for Stephon Diggs.
Now you're sounding hip. Go talk to your kids and say, "Oh, guys, those shoes you're wearing give me the ick." But anyway, the good receivers, but there's something wrong here. Stephon Diggs. The ick is he stepped back last year, and he's in a more crowded offense than he's ever been. Devontae Smith, crowded offense, new system, just don't know. George Pickens, we've never seen him do this before. Keenan Allen, good receiver. Now he's really fat and ate a lot of deep dish pizza. And he's playing with DJ Moore. Fat Keenan. Zay Flowers, we've never seen him do it. And Mark Andrews didn't play much last year. And now he's back. T. Higgins, he's just the definition of this tier. He's really good. But if Ja'Marr Chase misses time, he's going to probably be a wide receiver 1. Otherwise, he's probably just a meandering wide receiver 2. Steven, I'll let you start.
T. Higgins is just he's going to be a career wide receiver 2. That's just what he is. But Devonta Smith, you don't like his situation more this year? I'm just kidding.
I could like his situation
I feel like
more.
that system, the passing offense should be a little bit better.
Dallas Goedert's healthy. His splits with Goddard are really weird and a little concerning. They're not terrible, but his numbers definitely dip when Goddard's in the lineup. So
I don't know how much that holds up. Like, I don't know if that's going to be like just a thing, like probably small sample size.
Been a thing for 2 years. Goddard misses games, so he's going to have his spike weeks.
It's just weird though. Isn't that one of those weird ones? Like, I'm just not worried. I'm not typically worried about a wide receiver because of Dallas Goedert. Like, he's fine. I think this group though, I feel like this tier maybe should get bigger, Andrew.
I agree. There's guys in tier 6 I want in this tier.
Yeah, I think like I'm looking at your tier 6, which you have to the side of tier 5.
I wanted to make all of them on the same page so you wouldn't have to scroll the entire time, Steven. I'm trying my best.
I think I prefer it vertically, but let's see. Yeah, this tier should get bigger.
Who would you move up into it?
Christian Kirk.
I would move. Well, I feel like Chris Godwin and Zay Flowers feel like the same to me. I don't see a difference there. Yeah, I would say Christian Kirk and Zay Flowers probably about the same to me. Tank Dell,
I think
probably
Tank
got to
Dell's
move
there
him
too.
in that tier. And even Marquise Brown, like, I want to look a little more into this injury, but prior to him being injured the other day, I would definitely have him in this tier.
I agree with you on Hollywood Brown. I definitely had him a tier higher, but this injury moves me down just enough. It does make me nervous. If Xavier Worry plays well enough, he'll take some snaps.
And Marquise Brown's always hurt, and now he's hurt again. So it just feels like we're getting more of the same with him.
He's an itty-bitty boy, and the Chiefs loves their itty-bitty boys, but their itty-bitty boys keep getting hurt, and the big, strong guys like Rashee Rice, I think, are just going to take a lot of that target share away.
I'm looking at tier 5, tier 6, and tier 7. I think you combine 5 and 6. I really feel like that's one tier.
Would you then, then let's go with the would you throw your shoe at me argument. Would you throw your shoe at me, Steven, if I took Chris Godwin over Devontae Smith?
No.
You should throw your shoe at me. Devontae Smith. Oh, you would be okay with someone taking Devontae Smith over Chris Godwin? Wait. Or sorry, flip that. Chris Godwin over Devontae Smith.
Yeah, I mean, I probably wouldn't do it, but I wouldn't. I don't think it's going to be drastic.
Slot Godwin's back.
Yeah, we're getting slot Godwin. Slot Godwin. Didn't really work.
I guess it is a similar situation. It's a quarterback who's...
I mean, Chris Godwin has... I know it's been a while, but he's been the wide receiver 2 overall before. If he goes back to that slot role... Here, both of these guys, what are we expecting? 15 to 16 points per game? That's what we're looking at, maybe? Between 14 and 16? I think both of those guys do that.
I think that's the ceiling for both of these guys. I just think Devontae Smith has a better shot at hitting that ceiling out of pure offensive firepower. I just think the Eagles are going to score a lot more points, and Devontae Smith will have a chance to score those.
Let's throw in the other factor of Saquon Barkley. Do you think that has any effect on this a little bit?
I think those are going to be Jalen Hurts rushing touchdowns. I forgot who it was. Someone was making a great argument that Jalen Hurts might not get as much tush push this year because last year we saw him get hurt. And it's not even as much the Jason Kelce stuff as we saw him get hurt last year. And now you have a worse center, so maybe I think that's where the touchdowns go.
I agree with that, but maybe Barkley gets a few more receptions than we've seen from the running back position in the past. So I think overall, no shoes getting thrown. Jacob, are you throwing a shoe?
If tier 6 is combined with tier 5?
Like Godwin versus Smith, is there a shoe hitting anybody from you?
No.
And you like to throw shoes.
Yeah, no.
You're a shoe chucker?
Godwin's a good receiver. I know last year was a down year. He still had 130 targets. He only had 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
The year before that, he was the wide receiver 19. Year before that, he was the wide receiver 16.
Andrew. We need the tiers combined. That's what
all right. I have to change some colors, but I deleted it. So then we're saying that to repeat those names: Stephon Diggs, Devonta Smith, George Pickens, Keenan Allen, Fat Keenan, Zay Flowers, T. Higgins, Chris Godwin, Christian Kirk, Tank Dell, and Hollywood Brown,
No.
depending on injury. I think
can't
with the
get
injury,
behind
move him
Hollywood
out.
Brown, regardless. I'm
You
sorry.
won't. You can't get behind him?
I can't get behind him.
He's had those stints, though, where he's been a top 5 wide receiver.
Xavier Worthy's too good.
You know what? Only because of the injury. He's a guy I was taking a lot in mock drafts up until this injury. But yeah, I think that's fine.
I think there's 2 guys in honorable mentions that I think could get thrown into tier 5.
I agree as well. I just based on our rankings, I couldn't take the guy who was 42nd and put him into with the 20s.
Yeah.
So I needed permission to do some stuff.
Yeah.
So getting into our honorable mentions, which is the last group of guys we're getting into, because we're looking at the top like 45 wide receivers at this point. So after this, make your tiers, they're meaningless. Deontay Johnson, Terry McLaurin, Calvin Ridley, Ladd McConkey, Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Brian Thomas, Hollywood Brown. Dare I say, a lot of these guys, we haven't seen you do it, at least to a crazy level. A lot of these guys have quarterback issues. So I really do think they belong in this weird tier together. But Jacob, who are you making an argument for moving up?
I would move Calvin Ridley up. I know I'm higher on Calvin Ridley than most, but
You'd put him into another tier?
I'd put him into tier 5 with those other guys that we just talked about.
Explain yourself.
Yeah. I'm gonna need it.
Last year's wide receiver 18, was that terrible? Everyone hated him last year, but he was still a top 20 guy. He's the number 1 in that offense. I'm sorry, D-Hop's getting too old. And
I was in on D-Hop until he
D-Hop got hurt.
Got hurt old
Yep.
hurt.
So this offense is also projecting to be pretty pass heavy now with the loss of Derrick Henry and with 2 receiving type backs. I think they're going to pass more. They paid Calvin Ridley a ton of money. I think he's just a good receiver. I see the upside there, and I don't see a big difference between Will Levis and say Russell Wilson.
I think I've only taken Calvin Ridley in 1 mock draft.
I get him so late though.
It's talking about that because you just moved him, Andrew, into the ick tier, right?
I'm dragging him. Yeah,
and
there's
that's fair.
something icky here.
I
That's
have
fair.
a hard time in that ick tier. I've found.
That's fine.
See, but
he can be a little icky, but I think he's going to be solid this year.
I'm just looking at names in this ick tier like Stephon Diggs, Devonta Smith, George Pickens, and I'm like, I really wouldn't think twice about. I wouldn't even think about Calvin Ridley if Devonta Smith is on the board, or if Stephon Diggs is on the board, if T. Higgins is on the board. I'm not thinking about Calvin Ridley, but I think you have a good point of his situation's actually just not that different. So is that on us, or is Jacob
it's on
wrong?
you guys?
Even though we do the missing points and we know Calvin Ridley should have had a better season last year,
Yeah.
I still can't shake it that he just doesn't. He just feels icky. I'll admit it. But he could be one of those guys that makes us look dumb, Andrew.
Tennessee
Calvin
overall
Ridley.
feels a little icky, so it's fair.
With just woeful quarterback play, and I don't even remember who the offensive coordinator for the Titans was last year, and I think I know a lot of the offensive coordinators.
Yeah.
Can't remember who it was, but that was a terrible system last year. They're completely misusing Will Levis. I don't think they were ready for Will Levis to play last year. That O-line was absolutely dreadful.
Mm-hmm.
And DeAndre Hopkins was the wide receiver 29, and he had no competition. Like, he had 136 targets. But I also just think that Calvin Ridley, especially with D-Hop missing time, could really... Now there's no one behind D-Hop. Now there's no one behind Ridley as long as D-Hop's not there. So Ridley's going to get off to a hot start. And Levis, year 2 quarterback, that's something you want to bet on.
But aren't we expecting Hopkins week 1, though?
It's week 1, and then I guarantee there's going to be a little bit of injury easing into it.
If he's ready to go, he's already got the connection with Will Levis. That's the only thing. I still think if we get a healthy D-Hop, and for the most part, other than, D-Hop's been relatively healthy, right? Like, he's not been a receiver that misses a ton of time. I do think that's troublesome for Ridley.
I can't believe D-Hop was wide receiver 22 last year.
Yeah, wide receiver 29 in points per game, wide receiver 22 in the finish. D-Hop stayed healthy all of last year, to his credit. But I do think you've got a point. I don't think I can bring myself to take Calvin Ridley over someone like even Tank Dell. That's just because Tank Dell is so fun. Like, he's this little guy who's going to go downfield and look really cool as he's catching passes from a really cool guy named CJ Stroud. Like, I just want that on my team over the Mayo boy throwing balls to this guy who made Trevor Lawrence look sad.
I feel like Tank Dell's starting to feel like Steve Smith.
Why
Like,
is that?
he just feels like a physical little guy. You know,
Just short.
like,
He's just short. You just say it. He's short, Steven.
well,
That's
he
why.
is, but
All short guys look the same.
But he's got the heart of a lion. Okay, Andrew.
You're not wrong. Tank Dell got shot
And
last year, and he's already back.
And his name is Tank. I mean, come on. That's not a little guy that plays big.
All right, Jayden Reed.
That's the other name I wanted to bring up.
I absolutely agree. This is okay, and I can't even argue with my chest that he needs to be really high.
No, I didn't say I was behind that move that you just did right there.
Well, okay, I'm mostly just dragging him out so we see him. All right, I have control of this sheet, Steven. I'll take away your editing powers. But Jayden Reed, he was a top. Well, I gotta pull it up here. He was top 30 last year. Okay, in points per game. He scored a lot of touchdowns. A lot of it came off of that. Wide receiver 26 in points per game last year as a rookie. And this was a guy that a lot of people were keying in on, myself, Jesse included, and other analysts, of this dude's actually kind of underrated. Jumped out at people being drafted higher in drafts than we'd thought. And now he's a rookie who put up good numbers, entering year 2 with a quarterback that's established in an ambiguous situation. I think the reason he's down here is because people have convinced themselves Dontavian Wicks is actually going to be a thing for sure, or that Christian Watson's now magically going to stay healthy forever, or that Romeo Doubs is all of a sudden the best receiver in Green Bay. I don't overthink this. It's probably just Jayden Reed.
I don't think it's just Jayden Reed. I think that Christian Watson's the only wide receiver in that group that has looked dominant to me at times. And if he stays healthy, I think he could be very good.
That's a big if.
And another part with Jayden Reed is, not only did he have a lot of touchdowns on, not a ton of catches, he also had 2 rushing touchdowns. So I think there's good reason.
So he's versatile.
Yeah, but you can't bank on those. I mean, he had 11 attempts, Jacob, and he scored 2 touchdowns on those attempts. So I don't know. I don't really want. I have not drafted anyone from this wide receiver core. Maybe Christian Watson, because he goes late enough that I have gotten some Christian Watson, and I actually kind of like where he's going. And sorry, I take that back. And I've drafted Wicks a ton because you can get him with pretty much your last pick in the draft. And I do think there's a chance he's one of the top receivers in this offense. I mean, we just saw it the other day. He looked pretty good. So, yeah, I'm not as in on Reed where he's going. And I don't necessarily think he should be out of the tier that you have him in.
What's the highest you could imagine Jayden Reed finishing on the year? Wide receiver what?
He feels like wide receiver 22 to me.
15.
15? I'm more in line with that 15, Steven. He was the wide receiver 26 in a point per game basis last year.
Yeah, and again, I still think that was without a lot of Christian Watson. I mean, yes, I guess Watson could get injured a lot this year, but there's other good wide receivers on that team. And I think this is going to be spread the ball around type of offense. I think Jordan Love's going to move it around. And again, lots of touchdowns, rushing touchdowns. I think he has touchdown regression in his range of outcomes. And I don't know that he catches a lot more passes.
Jayden Reed is someone who had a 24.4% target rate, but to Steven's credit, he had a 56.8% snap share. That went up a little bit of points of the season, but he's a guy who needs to play on 12 wide receiver and 12 personnel. He's not on the field all the time unless there's 3 receivers. To Steven's credit, if that doesn't change, he doesn't sniff anything any higher. Is there anyone else you would consider moving up? Again, Deontay Johnson, Terry McLaurin, Lad Daddy?
This is where, value versus where you'd rank them. Like, I've got so much Deontay Johnson that I've drafted. And he feels like he should be in this other tier, the ick tier. I feel like Deontay Johnson, I feel pretty good about him. I don't know. Where are you guys at with him?
I don't see any ceiling, so I'm just staying away. I don't care to have the floor player on my team that I'm drafting as like my wide receiver 4. I want nothing but upside where Deontay Johnson's getting drafted, and I don't see it with him. So it's just been an avoid for me.
I mean, I guess it's, what are we looking at here? I mean, you're drafting your 4th wide receiver at this point, probably, if you're taking a Deontay.
Yeah, wide receiver 41 consensus ADP between, I'm looking at Draft Sharks, love draftsharks.com, but have a good ADP tool. It's combines Sleeper and Yahoo, and he's the wide receiver 41 combining those ADPs.
I just don't know. Does he have? I mean, honestly, if we're going by ceiling from that tier, Ladd McConkey looks like he's got the highest ceiling. And I don't know. Does Calvin Ridley have a huge ceiling in Tennessee? Is his ceiling much higher than Deontay's?
I think if you're going to say Deontay Johnson has a ceiling, then Calvin Ridley's is just as high. You're banking on a year 2 quarterback progressing. And I think there's about equal competition in both Tennessee and in Carolina. I think Ladd McConkey has the least amount of competition possibly in the best quarterback.
Yeah, and I've got a lot. Well, in Ladd McConkey, I think. Well, no, they go about the same spot. I'm thinking of Josh Palmer, actually.
Ladd McConkey, wide receiver 43 in that same consensus.
Yeah. God, this is feeling like it could be a giant tier because even Terry McLaurin, if Jay Daniels ends up being really good, now I like McLaurin more. This is a tough tier. I think you have it right though. I kind of feel like that's a good tier.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Last name I'm going to throw out before I get into the news: Brian Thomas, wide receiver rookie for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think is a worthwhile investment, especially where he's going in drafts, which is the wide receiver 48 on this consensus.
Well,
it's
let me
a
ask
rookie
you
wide
this.
receiver with a good quarterback.
Let me ask you this: do you think Brian Thomas catches more passes than Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram?
No,
but he could catch more touchdowns for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
High downfield targets.
Don't be surprised if he has double-digit touchdowns.
I will be surprised. But
that's what he did at
be.
LSU. It's a guy who is absolutely huge. This is size, speed, freak, one of the most athletic guys in the NFL.
To your point, though, if Trevor Lawrence, I think we all still have some belief in Trevor Lawrence. If he can bounce back this year, then yeah, I can see it.
Philosophically, I'm taking a guy like Brian Thomas over Terry McLaurin, over probably at this point Deontay Johnson, maybe over Calvin Ridley. It's just you're looking at an ambiguous situation with a good quarterback. You just could see this guy excel. There's some really good values back here in wide receivers. So kind of like I said in the earlier, that tier 4, I'm probably waiting out in that huge hodgepodge we said earlier. And then I'm probably grabbing some big dart throws after I loaded up on wide receiver early on. Is kind of how I'm approaching this. Made a great reel that'll hopefully be going out soon about my kind of draft strategy where I thought about it. And that's basically where I landed on it. But let's get into some news. News had a lot in this last week. We are fully in the football season. And unfortunately, with that comes a lot of injuries. We'll start off with JJ McCarthy, the guy whom I might have just traded for in a dynasty league. JJ McCarthy went down with a knee injury. It floats in.
Andrew.
He was on my team.
It was on Jacob's team. He floats into our newsfeed of, he's dealing with soreness. Might not practice today, too. He's having surgery out of absolutely nowhere. Whoa. We'll see what happens with this surgery. Might only be 4 to 6 weeks. He's done for the year. Torn meniscus. Will not return to next year, where luckily, if you're a dynasty player or thinking far enough ahead, he'll be completely recovered for next year. Jacob, what does this do to your boy Justin Jefferson?
For what? For redraft or for dynasty?
Redraft.
We already talked about him a little bit. He's a tier 1 receiver if JJ McCarthy was going to be healthy. I saw exactly what I wanted to see in the preseason from JJ. He was really good at slinging the ball around. I think he would have benefited Jefferson plenty to be the elite receiver that he is. So it knocked him down a whole tier for me, and it's got him sitting at wide receiver 5 as opposed to 4. So I only dropped him one spot. I'm still just a big believer in the talent. I think Darnold's going to throw enough in this type of offensive scheme that he's going to have in Minnesota. So it hurts. It hurts a lot. I think the ceiling is diminished, but Jefferson's just so good that I'm going to believe still.
Steven, what are your thoughts with Sam Darnold throwing the ball to Justin Jefferson?
Yeah, no, I posted about it. I feel like I need a better clarification of that because I said I am kind of out on him this year, like removing him from my draft board, but that's based on his ADP. If his ADP falls and I can get him in the late first, early second, I'm more in on Justin Jefferson. I just can't. He's going as the wide receiver 3 still, and I just can't get behind that. we talked about rookie quarterbacks and how they're bad for wide receiver ones. So I was already a little bit low on him with expecting some JJ McCarthy. But what is it with really bad quarterbacks? Like, I don't care if you got a middle of the pack quarterback, you got Jared Goff, I don't care as much. You got Tua Tagovailoa, I don't care as much. But if you got, Sam Darnold, like what is he? Is he a bottom 3 quarterback? Like, who's worse than him as far as a starting quarterback right now in the NFL? Like, where does he rank?
I'd really have to. Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew combo is going to be up. Is going to be down there.
Which is a good one to bring up because look at Devontae Adams last year.
Potentially like a Will Levis situation could be that bad. You're right. It's a bottom 5 situation, not one you could ever dream of. The saving grace is pass volume.
We know he has a bottom. Let's just say bottom 5 quarterback. Yeah, that can't be great. I know he's Justin Jefferson, but you can't just. It's the most important position in football. You can't just go, it doesn't matter. Like, everyone keeps saying Justin Jefferson is QB proof. Let's see a full season if he goes a full season.
Because we have a small sample size of him being quarterback proof.
Yes. If we see a full season of Justin Jefferson and he finishes top 5, I will say, yeah, I guess he is QB proof. But don't give me the couple of games with Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs. Give me, because
they were good games, though.
Here's the thing, though. Remember Josh Dobbs, how that guy looked unstoppable and everyone loved him until defenses had 8 games of film on him. And then all of a sudden he was pretty stoppable. I think that's probably what we'll see with Sam Darnold. Yeah, maybe they start out hot for 4 games, maybe even 8 games. But I think, especially if he's the only guy, if the other guys, if they can't move the ball around, I don't know. I just think this could be trouble. So I still like him in that tier 2, but I just don't think he has the top 3 upside anymore, assuming everybody's healthy in the tier above him.
We saw Justin Jefferson play with less than ideal quarterbacks once Kirk Cousins was down, and it was mostly Nick Mullins from weeks 14 through 18. He averaged 18.6 points per game, which we are saying is good, but that was less than his 20 points per game that he averaged overall in the season. That drops you from Justin Jefferson, who was the wide receiver 5. He still would have been the wide receiver 5, but only barely. He had 20.2 points per game last year. Puka Nacua was 17.6. So to your credit, Steven, it drops him from he's way ahead of the next tier to he's just in that next tier down. It will not be as safe, won't be as high as ceilings.
Well, run that number for me without week 14 again, because he only played 18% of snaps that week.
Getting my men on that. But
didn't he score like 40 in week 18 also, or something like that?
39.
Anyway, it's not hard to see that there is obviously some more variance that's going to come from this.
Yeah.
Another guy who we're pouring one out for. I'm giving away my hamstring on Instagram. Jahmyr Gibbs is having hamstring issues going into it, and Steven is our hamstring expert, is an old man who has a problem pulling that there muscle.
It still hurts.
It looks like he's going to play week 1. It's out there, but these things linger. Steven, how long is it taking you to recover from a hamstring injury from 2 years ago?
We're almost a year, Andrew, not 2.
But do you have world-class medicine at your fingertips?
No.
And are you in the prime of your life?
And I stretch sometimes when I think about it. No, but I just think there's a chance this flares up. We see it every year with these guys that get hurt in the preseason and training camp, and it lingers. I'm just worried about it lingering. He is a fast twitch athlete, and I feel like he relies on that explosiveness. I would be nervous drafting him in the first round.
Can I name game with you guys, since we're kind of looking at Gibbs now and moving him down a little bit?
I'd be honored.
Gibbs or Kyren Williams?
I have Kyren Williams now over Gibbs.
Yeah, I'd probably take Kyren. Yeah.
Gibbs or Saquon?
Oh, I'm really high on Saquon, so I'm going to say I'd rather take Saquon.
I currently have Gibbs.
I currently have Gibbs as well. Gibbs or ETN?
I think I'm going to go ETN.
I need to put ETN higher than I currently have him. I'm moving him as we speak.
Yeah. And then Gibbs or Achane?
Oh, I have Devon Achane irresponsibly high. Don't ask me. He's my RB4.
That's fine.
Oh, God.
That's fine.
I need to figure out how to weight our consensus to where I am like 75%, and Andrew, you're like 10. No.
What's the difference? Well, we can get into this again. Last week, I brought up the question, what's the difference between Devon Achane and Jahmyr Gibbs? And I didn't get an answer I liked. But anyway.
No, it was more that you had him at 4. But
and Jahmyr Gibbs was the consensus RB4. Anyway. Yeah. Jahmyr Gibbs, it's something to pay attention to. If for some reason we hear, oh, it's getting worse, he's still not practicing, or you're here down news, all of a sudden this is turning into like a Cooper Kupp kind of thing. So ears are peeled for it. We're not panicking just yet. Guy we brought up a couple times, so I'm just going to briefly go past it. Marquise Brown, a sternoclavicular injury. Yes, I practiced that one. To Mr. Hollywood Brown, itty bitty boy, broken bones. He fell down really hard and now has a shoulder collarbone, I think is what that would be. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but he's expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks. It's looking like a week 2 return if they let him ease into it. So this is going to let Xavier Worthy get into some playing time. Rashee Rice really take firm hold. I'm worried about Hollywood Brown. We talked about him already. I want to bring up this one. I don't think enough people are talking about it. Marshawn Lloyd has been having lots of issues in camp, lots of issues fumbling. Lloyd being the RB2 potentially in Green Bay. Now the rookie running back is out with a hamstring injury. Jacob, are you high on? You're a Josh Jacobs stan. So what does this mean?
I'm not a stan for him, but I like him. All it means is that we're going to see more AJ Dillon again, and that drives me nuts.
Oh, that's not the answer I wanted.
That's what it means. We know they want to play 2 running backs in Green Bay, sometimes 3 running backs in Green Bay. So I think it just means we see more AJ Dillon at the start of the season. I still like Josh Jacobs. I think his like just volume is solidified. I wasn't really worried about Marshawn Lloyd taking a big chunk of that volume, at least at the start of the season. So I'm not worried about AJ Dillon either. So for Josh Jacobs, I think it's obviously good news. But
I think the hard thing with Josh Jacobs is here's some guys he's surrounded by.
Yeah, that is the issue.
Isaiah Pacheco. I don't know that I want to move him above Pacheco.
Mm-hmm.
Rashad White. I don't think I want to move him above White either.
I do.
But are we really worried about Bucky Irving? Like, I'm not overly worried about him.
No, Rashad White's just not a good running back. We talked about this in the last pod, but
he'll catch enough passes to be relevant. And then Alvin Kamara, I'm you know what? I'm Devon Achane high on Alvin Kamara. I really like him this year. So
well, to the point with Jacobs you just brought up, he is the pass catching back in this offense.
Yeah.
And those are good in Green Bay. We've seen Aaron Jones dominate that role for a while when he's healthy, obviously, but AJ Dillon's not going to catch passes. I wasn't expecting Marshawn Lloyd to do so.
No, it makes me more comfortable. I haven't drafted a lot of Josh Jacobs, but now it makes me feel more comfortable drafting him.
Fair enough.
I also don't think it's discussed enough. Matt LaFleur is notoriously one of the biggest McVay Shanahanites, who is the biggest copycat. So people are saying, oh, LaFleur has never only started one running back. He's a rotation guy. Well, we saw Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, who are also rotation guys, all of a sudden flip to not rotating backs anymore. And I could see LaFleur following suit. And I don't think he'll get 80% of touches like Kyron or CMC, but we could see him touch 60, 70%. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility, and I'm ranking him as such.
Well, and Shanahan, I mean, he did add Christian McCaffrey, so there's probably a reason why he stopped shifting back.
He added a good running back. What did we see Green Bay
to your
do?
point, that's the copycat part of it. LaFleur went and got Josh Jacobs, so maybe he doesn't want to do that.
And they did seek him out. That's worth noting.
And
the deep X's and O's, they want to run a duo more power system. You can't do that with AJ Dillon. You can do that with Josh Jacobs.
Yeah.
Getting us into almost injuries, we saw scares, but we want to clarify that these probably aren't things to be concerned about. Malik Neighbors, ankle injury. It looked like the world was ending after he looked great.
It was scary.
It was terrifying. He looked great all training camp. Ankle injury, not a concern. He even said, like, look, I thought I was fine in the first place. I was smart, checked out with a trainer just to make sure I'm fine. Malik Neighbors, A-okay. This one looked real bad.
This is the weirdest one I think I've ever seen.
Tyrone Tracy. Again, New York Giants, I don't know what their medical team is doing. I don't know what their beat reporters are doing. We start getting reports of Tyrone Tracy down, no contact. Tyrone Tracy now having air cast put on. Mind you, Rondale Moore just had a similar report. Rondale Moore is out for the year. So everyone's saying Tyrone Tracy, who's emerged as the RB2 to maybe spell Devin Singletary, is now down, out for the year. He's fine. It's a low ankle sprain. He'll be all right. He'll
He's
be back
Wolverine.
in a couple weeks.
Just regenerative abilities in his ankle.
So you're saying there's issues with staff in New York?
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing.
It's breaking news. New York may not be competent.
A little bit dysfunctional there. Yeah.
And their fields aren't good.
Never have been.
No, it's the worst field.
New York, baby. They're not living up to their name very much. And then the last bit of news to kind of pick into, we brought it up, but let's just clarifying points. Brandon Aiyuk, it's just not news. Every bit of news of Brandon Aiyuk is not news anymore. It really looked, we had a report saying Brandon Aiyuk is going to the Steelers, or the deal is in place. They never said he's going, but a deal is in place. 49ers have to sign off. And now it sounds like Brandon Aiyuk wants to be a 49er, and they just need to come around to final numbers on a deal. So
Brandon Aiyuk just likes being talked about. It just feels like
diva.
It just feels like he knows he's going to stay in San Francisco, but just I don't know what the contract they're offering him is. So
he's got a weird vibe that he's got to figure out with his teammates if he stays in San Fran. I think a lot of those guys thought he was gone for sure, and we're already moving past it, and it's just going to be a little bit of a weird vibe. Like Andrew said, he's not been at full speed or fully participating in camp. So
was he at the CMC wedding? I haven't looked through enough.
I don't think he was. I did see some photos, and I didn't see him.
This feels like Casey's task.
We got to get Cover Zero back on this. Speaking of which, likely coming back this offseason, Cover Zero for our listeners who are OGs and have been loving that bit. We will get our Casey back eventually on that Cover Zero page. He would absolutely figure this out for us.
Yeah, he did say he will. Once we get in season, we kind of do the weekly recap. We'll see. We'll see if we can get him doing some of these news stories. But I that would be one that would pop up.
Absolutely. And that wraps it up for us, unless you guys have some other news to bring up. But make sure you're getting out there, getting your draft set up. And as you're getting your draft set up, go play some Underdog to go ahead and get yourself prepared for draft season. Use promo code GUIDES, GUIDES, to get yourself a free draft guide and a deposit bonus whenever you're playing Underdog. And get that draft guide. If you don't want to play Underdog, go to fantasyguides.com, pick up a draft guide. Then you don't have to think. We'll just have this thing for you that tells you who the good players are, who the bad players are, and you get all of our babbling in one form. I've written a lot of these posts. I promised you a lot of effort goes into all 200 something of these things. Fantasy season right around the corner. You're going to see more pods from us as we get closer to time in season. Don't you worry, Fantasy Guides will be there for you. Gentlemen, say goodbye to the friends at home.
Peace.
Bye, friends. I got to go move my rankings.